Barbados is a small island, but it was very nice, even although you live in a small village. Everybody knew each other, and you didn't have any problem. We had the one school, the one church, and the one post office, the one of everything. But when I was about 17, 18, there was actually invitations by one of the governments of England at the time. You know, we need nurses, we need post office people, we need people to work on the railways, and I always wanted to do nursing. So I saw this as an opportunity and I took it. Leaving my family, it was hard. It's like going into the unknown. You don't know where you're going and how you're going to get there and what is going to meet you when you get there. I started work the day after I came to this country. Some of the people that we met as patients, they were very negative, they were very nasty. I presume that it is just from mainly ignorance, because I think that some of them never encountered black people before. And that was very upsetting. However, for me as a person, if I decided to do something, I started, so I'll finish. From the word go, you write to each other, because again, the only way was by telephone, and we didn't have many of those in Barbados. The best thing I received was my mother's Christmas cake. This cake was a cake out of this world. And when you open this cake, the smell alone, it was full of rum. Because everybody that had a slice, they always come back for more, and I can assure you it didn't last very long. I think communication with my family, my friends, when you were going through a difficult time and you sort of had a letter, you probably would pick it up and read it and sort of look back on things and you would laugh. So that gave you a lot of inspiration.
I was arrested in 2007 for 5 armed robberies. My mum and dad, they were in Cyprus, and I remember they came back and I remember seeing them, and that was when it sort of hit me, because I saw the pain I caused the people that I cared about. That's when I realised that I needed to sort my life out, basically. So the way that prison is, it's filled with loads of little bursts of you know, sadness and then glimpses of hope. So the letters coming in, I think we used to get them sort of around lunchtime, and you just get, like, hopefully you'd hear like a little like come through underneath your cell door, and then it's like, oh, do you recognise the handwriting? Is it good news from because you get legal mail as well. I think one of my brothers like started like a Facebook page for me, and he just put like my prison address on it, and so I just got like quite a few letters from people that I hadn't seen for a while, and you just keep up the correspondence, because to get word from outside that things are, you know, happening, and you know time is still going. It's a good thing. When I was writing letters, we'd often send sort of graffiti pieces to each other as well. So that was kind of the first instance of like putting art into letters. Later on, when I was sort of going through them all, and I realised the wealth of material that I had there. The letters are great, relics of my experience. Together they form a self-portrait of me who I was then, with other people's words, and I think that that's quite a cool concept. But that person is not who I am now. It's kind of weird how someone can change that much and not recognise the person they used to be.
I like the fact that Alison makes me laugh, and she's also someone who continually challenges me to go outside my comfort zone.
I always go to Brian if I need some wise words. So if I've got a problem and I just think, oh, I don't know what to do about this, I take it to Brian, and he always gives me an angle on things that I'd never thought of before.
I was diagnosed with bowel cancer in June 2010. I mean, I didn't really know what it meant. I had no idea what was ahead of me. I didn't have any idea what the future would look like. Alison started to write to me 2 weeks after I told her that I had cancer. It's really difficult to know what to say to someone, because everybody is different about how they receive their cancer diagnosis. To get someone say, oh, I'm going to write you a letter, was actually quite unique.
I do remember sitting down on an evening in my flat and just spewing out my thoughts for the day. Because I'd said to Brian that the letters were going to be funny, I had spent the previous couple of weeks just gathering little funny anecdotes or listening to people's conversations. And I remember in the first letter saying to him that I was thinking about him and that I knew he was going to Reading to have his radiotherapy, and would he like me to go with him, and we could make it like a road trip like Thelma and Louise. And I tried to be really, really light about it all.
You know, when you're going through a regime of treatments and hospital appointments, it's important that you know that there's a world going on outside. So to receive one of Alison's letters, which was A, funny, and B, descriptive of what was happening in her world, was a real lifeline to a life that I used to have and I craved and wanted back.
We're incredibly close, and we're best friends, and that is down, I always think that is down to the letters.
Yes.
From the space that the letters gave for that friendship to develop in such a unique way.
I remember being a little girl of my mother. All of a sudden, there's this multi-billionaire who bring himself into my family. His intention is to get a wife on me, and I don't know why he was looking at me and see the wife, because I look at him and I was seeing this granddad. These old people, they tend to be like deciding everything for me. I felt like I was a victim of the circumstance, really. I ran away to Pretoria, which is not far from Johannesburg. Within a week, I was caught, brought back, and then I attempted again to be a little bit further. I went to Cape Town, Table Mountain, where life was really, really, really hard. I just decided to be a street girl for time being. It was a good experience for me. I felt like I'm tired of going all around South Africa. I just need a peace of mind, because I thought this was my last resort. I loved the idea of being in the UK, so already it was in my mind that, oh, if I get to the UK, I'm just going to have a fresh breath and everything. I didn't have a specific address at first until I met the late friend of mine, whom at least I was rest assured with his address, after a couple of years. I was really excited to get the letter that says, at last I was granted leave to remain, which is news that all of us are expecting, really. I hope my future will be brighter now.
I'd be devastated if there wasn't a postal service. A criterion for wherever I live is I have to have a post box nearby, and quite a decent mouth on that post box. I think right from going into the shop and buying stationery, I start to salivate. I think some people get that with clothes shopping or sweet shops, but I love paper, and I'm not alone in that. I'm sure that just the tactile feeling of it, and using a fountain pen or a cartridge pen, the whole process. I use the postal service in many different ways. I use it for letters to my MP. I use it for sending collages frivolously to friends. I'm a nurse, and one of the things I care about a lot is the NHS at the moment. So I've got one card that's ready to go, which is to my MP. You may remember that phone books used to be huge, and everybody's name pretty much was in it. So it was quite fun to look through to find extraordinary names. So sometimes I'd use that as a prompt to do a collage. And there's a Mr. Cattle that I found, so he'll be the recipient of that. But sometimes it's just a random act of joy or mischief.
I used to be in the army for 7 years. A lot of people told me I couldn't do it or that I wouldn't be able to do it. That pushed me even more to prove them wrong. 7 years later, I think I'm a better person for it. So I started my career in the army in the Royal Artillery. When I was in the artillery, I went over to Iraq for 6 months, worked on some guided missile systems, and then transferred over. And then I went to Afghanistan and was attached to the Duke of Lancaster's regiment. I met Becky in a nightclub. She tripped up the steps, so she says. I think she sort of like saw me and she wanted me to sort of catch her. So I always say that she fell into my arms. She's been there through thick and thin. She's been the one constant, basically, in my life. I knew I was going to ask Becky to marry me. Took her to the Royal Hotel when I come home, proposed to her, and then when I went back, we started planning the wedding. I was away in Iraq. It was quite difficult sometimes because I was sort of waiting on letters and pictures of like things that we'd looked at or that we'd spoke about, because I said that I wanted to see stuff before we'd booked it. I remember once we was doing chocolates, we was picking chocolates for it, and she sent them through the post, and they come and there was just mush. So on our first wedding anniversary, I was away again. I was in Afghanistan. And Becky, she sent me out a CD, which was basically, it was songs of sort of ones that was special to us throughout obviously our time together. All different ones, and for each song, she'd wrote a post-it note with the time and date that we'd heard that song, which to me absolutely turned me to mush when I was listening to it. Some of the things that you used to receive, they used to make you feel a little bit more homesick than others, but I'd say there was more positives out of them, because you knew that people was thinking about you back home, basically, and that you weren't just at the other side of the world and you was forgotten about.
I came to England to pursue career nursing from a little island called Antigua. At the time, the embassy from here came down to the Caribbean to try and recruit nurses because there was a shortage here. So I used to do a bit of volunteering at the hospital on a Sunday. And that sort of, I made up my mind after that, I wanted to do nursing. I was excited up until when I arrived here. Everyone, we were all strangers, really, a group of young women together. And, everybody was more or less in the same boat, because I was 20, some of the girls were 18, some were 19. Well, we all met because we all had to sort of assemble in the sitting room. And then after that, we became quite close. It was like a family. We do things together. For instance, when it started snowing, because I came in January, and when it started snowing, everyone was so excited. We put our coats on and we were outside making snowballs and doing lots of silly things. In the early days, phone calls were quite expensive, and post was more or less the cheapest form of keeping in touch. Well, you were excited, and once you got the letter, you just couldn't wait to open the letter to see what news you were about to receive. My relatives or my friends would tell me, about other friends that, sort of went abroad, or sometimes if someone was getting married, they'll update you if anyone died. They would just update you with whatever was going on at the time. Sometimes if you get off duty and you might be upset about something, that is what you would turn to and read it again. You couldn't wait to hear from them.
My life when I was in South Africa was quite interesting. I went through a lot of phases of difficulties. Right after I had given birth to my son, I ended up meeting a guy with the hope that he will be able to help me. Now and again, he will now, ask me to go to my parents and ask for money. It was too overwhelming for me. And when I resisted, he will become violent and he will be physical towards me. One day he now came and said to me, listen, you know, in order for us to be able to survive, the best way that we can do is we can be trafficking drugs. He says it's very safe, you know, you won't have any problem doing it. At first I resisted, but eventually I had to accept doing it due to the fact that, you know, we needed money to be able to sustain ourselves. I remember there was a time when I was fed up, you know, of being used as a, you know, as a drug trafficker. And he literally, you know, set me alight. I had to leave that life, you know, being in South Africa, or, you know, being under that bondage, that slavery of not knowing what freedom is, or what happiness is, of what value it is to be a woman. When I received that decree of divorce through the post, I was so happy and I felt free. That I'm no longer under, you know, slavery or, you know, subjection, and knowing very well that also I'm in the UK, and you know, I'm also safe, you know, I'm away from him.
We both happened to go to a website at the same time that randomly pairs two strangers from the internet together. And through our own channels, we both wanted to check it out, and we just happened to be randomly assigned to each other.
We talked a lot and knew each other really well and just really liked each other. And it just so happened to be that he was in America and I was in London.
I really enjoyed making you happy, and I knew a way to do that was to send you things, and I think you felt the same way. Especially when I was introduced to British chocolate and sweets. Like the first time I had a fruit pastel changed my entire perception of what fruit.
I sent a whole separate box that was just chocolate. We met on the internet in March 2010, and we didn't meet in person until February 2011. We had arranged to meet outside a train station, a subway station, and I think I saw you before you saw me. I saw you across the road, and I was like, there he is. We walked for quite a while around New York. By absolute chance, we ended up at the huge James A. Farley post office in New York, and I was very excited. The difference now that we live together and we're married in the same country is that we don't have to send each other letters so much anymore.
When we were going through to file for the visa, it was we relived it. We relived the experience. It's not really like scrolling backwards through a history on your phone or going through old emails. It was like actual like items, like a museum of us. Yeah. So I do miss that, but I'm very glad to be with you now.
Yeah, me too.
I come from Chile, and I come to England not by my choice, but because I was sending here as a refugee, exile, after being in concentration camp for almost a year under the dictatorship of Pinochet. The feeling of the Chileans at that time was not to believe. But then the reality started, because the army go into the street, start killing people, anyone who tried to oppose them. Everybody was scared about saying anything, doing anything, what's going to happen to them. They took us on what they call army tribunal, and they said, you're going to be in internal exile, which means to go to a town where you're under control of the army and everything. My family was suffering a lot. When I was in external exile, I was publicly, so I was able to contact them and to say, am I alive? All the letters have to go under control of the army. They open it and they read it. So they have to be very careful what they write and what I write. My communication by post, I try to pass the message, are my friend alive or not? And little by little, through the post, you are making connection. That was emotionally very, very heavy for me to receive the news, but it was the only way to communicate.